Happy to welcome my next guest to the show. That would be the head of Americans for Tax Reform. He is Grover Norquist. Grover, welcome back. How are you, sir?
I am doing well. Good to be here. Good to be in Louisiana.
No, glad to have you on. Glad to be chatting this morning. We had you on last year as well.
Yep.
And I don't think there's ever going to be a time where tax reform isn't a main topic. So,
well, there shouldn't be a time when tax reform, because we need to normalize the idea that every year, not only do people say, okay, we have all these spending interests that want money.
Mhm.
One question is, what are you going to do for taxpayers this year?
Right.
So if you're going to spend more on this, or this, what taxes are you reducing? And as long as you ask yourself that every year, the legislature can't get too crazy because there may be four spending interests that want something, and taxpayers. You can't leave taxpayers, push them away from the table.
So where those taxes come from, it feels like we see ebbs and flows or different waves of where the popular areas to tax have come from in the past. Here locally, we're trying to get rid of our income tax, our state income tax, so that we can keep up with surrounding states who are already either on that path or so far down that path we don't even see them anymore. But to do it, it feels like we're just making trade-offs thus far. In fact, our sales tax going up by half a penny.
Mm-hmm.
How do we get one without having to sacrifice the other?
What a number of states are doing, and just you talk about all 50 states. 50 states, 8 of them have no personal income tax now.
Right.
Okay. The most recent state to become truly a no personal income tax state was New Hampshire, and that was just a few months ago, January. Before that, it had taxed dividends and interest.
Mm-hmm.
So as you're saving for retirement, they tax that, but not your wages.
Okay.
So that's a step in the right direction, but it's now completely no income tax. 8 states, no personal income tax. There are 15 states now, actually, no, 16, with Louisiana going to a single rate tax.
Right.
So 15 states had a single rate tax, and that's very important because it takes envy off the table when you discuss. So we're going to reduce the 3% income tax,
mm-hmm.
or increase it. If the politicians can say, well, as there were in North Dakota till recently, 9 different rates, and you can tinker with them. You can go after one group and then after another, and you never have to face the entire audience, the citizens, at once. To give you an idea of how powerful a single rate tax is, Illinois, left-wing, Bolshevik, Chicago, 2-1 Democrat.
I wasn't ready for that word this morning, but okay.
We're talking about Illinois here. 2-1 Democrat control House and Senate.
Yeah.
Their personal income tax is under 5%.
Okay.
Why? Because by Constitution, they have a single rate tax.
Mm-hmm.
They only have one rate. Even with 2/3 majorities, even with a corrupt structure in Chicago guaranteeing that you can't ever lose an election, they're scared to raise taxes on everyone at once.
Right.
And so that shows the power. In Kansas, they just this year voted to go to a single rate tax, take the tax rates, that a couple of them, bring them all down to 4, and then that's your single rate tax there. The Lady Democrat governor of Kansas, was willing to do anything other than a single rate. And I'd always thought the single rate was key to future tax cuts,
mm-hmm.
to stop tax increases, but to watch her, whatever was put on the table, she just couldn't abide a flat rate tax. Now, mind you, Republicans got 2/3 majorities because she's left-wing and silly and ridiculous, and because they purged politely the 2 liberal Republicans who got paid off by the governor to vote with him from time to time with jobs, which also means they leave, and then the 2 quote-unquote conservatives who were too cool for school and everything wasn't perfect, and they might as well have been Democrats because they always voted no on any progress.
Right.
And that made them feel good, like peeing their pants or something. But anyway, they were also encouraged to take another job doing something else. They don't get in the way of progress. So 8 states, no income tax. 15 states, single rate, easy to reduce. And there are 12 states, like the state of Louisiana now, which has made a commitment to go all the way down to zero. And that is an incredibly important project because it means as revenue comes in, there are a couple questions. How much do we cut the income tax now?
Mm-hmm.
And what else do they just want to spend money on? But taxpayers are always there saying, cut taxes, cut taxes, cut taxes. I remember when people go, well, I already cut taxes in my term as governor in 4 years. So now I'm going to do other things. No. There's never other things. You can decide how much you want to cut taxes, which cut taxes you want to cut. But by definition, taxes take money from people who earned it and give it to people who didn't necessarily earn it.
Taxes also pay for things like roads and schools and like there are legitimate things there as well. And I think I'm sorry, I'm going to pivot the discussion real quick because I want to make sure we get to addressing those needs, making sure that government is doing what it was original function is to do, and that's on a federal level, state level, local level. All these levels of government have their different roles. That which is not in the Constitution kicks down the state.
Yep.
State kicks down the local. Everybody has their role to pay and their role to play, and taxes do need to be collected to fund those things. Now, we are starting to see a trend right now, and this takes us up to Doge. We're starting to see a trend right now where on all levels of government, we're starting to open our eyes up a little bit and say, hey, are we spending these dollars wisely?
Absolutely. And one of the challenges is a government that tries to do 50 things is not going to do the 3 important ones well, because the focus is always on the new shiny thing.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, when you take government outside of its legitimate realm and start doing things, first of all, it generates all sorts of fights back and forth. Government's not very good at doing certain things. It's not even very good at building roads in terms of being cost effective. But I think it's very important that we reduce the number of things the government's trying to do,
mm-hmm.
because that reduces the level of stupid and the level of expense. And this is the comparison between Florida and New York. Florida and New York have roughly the same number of people. There are 2.5 million more people in Florida than New York, but they're about the same.
Mm-hmm.
Last year's numbers, Florida spent $115 billion, state of Florida. New York, $230 billion.
Right.
Twice as much. And they have the same number of people. So they both have roads, New York, Florida. They have schools. The schools aren't any better in New York. The roads aren't any better in New York. What you buy for a doubling, and then when people say, well, if you don't have an income tax, how are you going to pay for X, Y, and Z? Florida spends $115 billion every year less than New York, which means that's the income tax they don't have.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
Right.
What do you do?
Probably dollar for dollar. I mean, I'm sure it's close.
Yeah. And here's what New York gets for twice as much taxes each year. More government employees who work fewer hours each day, fewer days each year, fewer years in their life. Benefits that you and I will never see,
right.
Pensions that you and I will never see. They have an aristocracy that is paid way beyond what they produce, mm-hmm. and what they're worth and what they could make in another zone. And it's a credentialed community. You get a credential and then you've got the job. You don't have to be any good at it. You just have to come, I have a teacher's certificate. What does that mean? It means what the teachers union says it means.
When did we start looking at the government as a job driver?
I think that
not in the private sector. I mean, within the government itself.
Yes. Probably Franklin Delano Roosevelt, or I'm not sure Hoover did that much of it. Every dumb thing that Franklin Delano Roosevelt did to make government too fat, too big, too bloated, doing things that it was not supposed to do, Hoover tried first. So to be fair to FDR, he just took stupid and put it on steroids.
Okay.
Putting price controls on farm products, and Hoover took tax rates up dramatically, and then FDR even higher. There was a Great Depression in 1921, but it lasted 18 months because the Republican presidents cut taxes and cut spending. And things got back to normal, and they started growing again. Then you had what was another recession. But because the government decided to fix this one, it lasted either 10 years or 15 years, depending on whether you're counting unemployment or GDP. But it lasted a long. The recession we did the most to fix lasted the longest. It's not like they did so much because all the stuff they did was at the beginning.
Yeah.
And that's what made it last a long, long time.
All right, I apologize. I redirected you again. Let's get you back on track with Doge. We're talking with Grover Norquist. He heads up Americans for Tax Reform. Your gut take, is Elon Musk going to be successful and to what level? And I don't want to credit just Elon because he's just a figurehead here. He's the guy that everybody points at and wants to, light their torches and go after.
And the press is not capable of nuanced thinking, so they have you give them.
Well, I just showed that example. Yeah, it's guilty.
And that's what they focus on. But it is also true that he brought in a great deal of talent that does not exist inside the government. Mm-hmm. They were going in and saying, let's check and see how many people are getting Social Security checks. Let's see if the names on what's going out, are people getting one check or two? And so they found a number of stuff. It may be that some of the people who were 120 and 150 years old were no longer getting checks, but their names were still in the system.
So
what stopped that from happening?
Right.
Okay? I had always assumed as a kid that when you died, the mortician sent a note to Social Security and they stopped writing checks to you. Not clear how that happens or whether it happens selectively. And to cross-check people who pay taxes, people who have Social Security numbers, people who are citizens, because there are a list of those, and to check and see who's in the country, who's not in the country, or some people, several people. I remember when Reagan talked about, actually Reagan never used the term welfare queen, but other people did, because there was, I think one person was getting 16 checks, had one of those very long names with a number of different last names.
Yes.
And each one was getting a check. But only one Social Security number. So with computers and so on today, you could catch that sort of thing quicker than they did back then. So he is focusing through X, through Twitter. When they find something, they kick it up and out. When the Grace Commission, which Reagan put together, Reagan gave the Grace Commission 3 years to come. They found $100 billion worth of waste. Much of it was things the government could do, Reagan could do as the manager of the government, what laws that needed to be changed. So a lot of savings were made. They block granted many, many welfare programs, little small ones.
We got 2 minutes left with Grover Norquist. I do want to try to get into what your role is here today.
Sure.
But I got one more on Doge.
Okay.
Doge eliminates a lot of waste within the government. That does not change my tax bill come April 15th. Is this going to, yes or no question, is this going to translate into my taxes on a federal level going down?
It will, and the tax cut will pass this year. The continuation of the Trump tax cuts plus some other tax reductions, all made possible because you're seeing them bending down the cost curve. If they drop 400,000 government jobs and hold that for 10 years, that is $1 trillion savings.
What are we doing today? What's on tap for you within the Solution Summit?
To talk about Louisiana and how it's doing in the race to get to zero and keep taxes and spending low, and also talk about other ideas in the future, things other states are doing, things that are happening in Washington, D.C., that are either good examples or bad examples of what to do.
1 minute.
Avoid.
He is Grover Norquist. He heads up Americans for Tax Reform. Give us a grade real quick between last year and this year. Louisiana, we're getting better, we're getting worse. What are we doing?
The move to phase the income tax to zero is incredibly important. Those states that continue to have income taxes, and especially high income taxes, California, New York, New Jersey, they are going to continue to fall further and further behind. People are deciding where to move factories, where to move jobs, where to move themselves, their children, where to invest their money, and it is flowing into those states that are either at zero or headed to zero.
He is Grover Norquist, heads up Americans for Tax Reform, going to be part of the rundown
15.
for Pelican Institute's Solution Summit today. Grover, I appreciate the time, man. Thank you so much.
For the opportunity.
10.
Always a fascinating conversation.